Hi, Mike Ratner. This is Mike'sMastermind.com. We talk a little bit about my ideas on IGO, which hopefully by now, if you've been listening to Mike'sMastermind.com, know what I'm talking about. The IGO is the selfie of the mind, this projection of our persona, this as we see or perceive. So it's the self imagining the self, which is kind of an interesting arena of consideration. And I'm into acronyms, but only recently I thought, well, the IGO is itself, but what people can say, well, you're big on acronyms, so what does IGO stand for? So you could say the three components you could say, are the composite of this self projection, but also expression, incorporates the ideal self, the person we could imagine has it together, it's complete, happy, has fulfilled its goals or ambitions. It's the direction we want to go in an ideal setting, right? To have a complete and fulfilled life. And then the G stands for the grounded self, like what we're dealing with our day to day realities. And that might be just looking in the mirror and just seeing you for who you are rather than, you know, what one might positively or negatively imagine, just sort of having a sense of being. And this would be the grounding. So I for ideal, G for grounding, and the O is kind of like the outcome. And that is sort of what comes out in our composite self. And that can be in the moment, so flexible depending upon mood and other attributes of the environment. And that could be just sort of context of, where we're with, who we're with. So it's reflected maybe in how we're feeling, our self-esteem, self-worth, and our ability to sort of clearly and passionately be who we want to be in that particular context or moment. Well, in today's talk, I just want to reference some of the writing of David R. Hawkins. If you're familiar with David's work, his first and big breakthrough book was Power versus Force, The Hidden Determinants of Human Behavior. And then followed up what I believe is the eye of the eye. So he spells it, the I, E-Y-E, like your eye, what you see, of the eye. So I just want to kind of quote a little bit out of, I use a lot of references, right? But on this occasion, the whole chapter is amazing. I'm referring to chapter 6, the resolution of the ego. Now we're making a distinction here from the ego, which is the selfie of the I, to what we commonly call the ego, which is sort of the mediator between the ego, it is the ego between the superego and the id, if you follow Freudian psychoanalysis. But we do use ego in our common languaging, and I think what David is talking about in chapter 6 of the I, the resolution of the ego, really hits upon the sense of recognizing what I've been calling the ego, which is important, I think, in determining the sense of projected self so we can wake up from morbidity or get out of the mass trance, which I write about, masstrance.com. You can get a sampling of these ideas at grandtourideas.com, but right now I'm just going to read the first paragraph, which I think I'm going to use in a quote, probably more in my Weltslosh writing, which you can also get a link through grandtourideas.com, or go to weltslosh.com if you can spell it. If you're German, no problem. Revelation occurs when the obstacles standing in its way are removed. So in the Weltslosh, I talk about how things are seen within the construction of our world. And as things unfold, something's revealed. So he looks at this. The revelation occurs when obstacles standing in its way are removed. That's the first opening sentence of the chapter. These obstacles fall of their own accord when their underpinnings are taken away. Such an underpinning is the concept of cause. Why this realization is so important can be grasped when we see that the belief in cause is a major support of the illusion that one is separate, self-existent, and independent self or an ego. Now that in itself is pretty powerful to unpack. When I read that right away, I was like, "Whoa!" His writing is really amazing. Difficult to just say concise, although it's exactly what it is, because when you read a sentence or a paragraph like that, you just gotta go, "Whoa!" and want to re-examine what it is you just read. So, and of course, being a bit ADD like I am, pretty much every other word, no matter what I read, is kind of like, oh, that's making me think of something else, or I can refer to something. But here is something really deep. So he goes on to talk about how cause is implicitly dualistic, and a part of awakening from the mass trance is to realize, if you're on one side or the other, you're on opposing sides. So it's yin versus yang, hot versus cold, right versus left. And in this way, we're talking about duality. So if there's a this and there's a that, and this will cause that, right? There's going to be a cause for something. Even if you are taking a stand for something that you cause or you call a cause, there's something that's implied that is there's an I in that experience, and then you're kind of compelled to give an explanation to it. So in that way, you're going to take an action or take a stand, and you might not be aware of the flight you take every day, which I describe as TWA, which is your thoughts, words, and actions that's reflecting an identity, which is this internal dialogue that I write about, that's making the accusation or the point or the argument, because there's a sense of this projected self, which I'm calling the IGO. And in this way, um, David's talking about that there's and then becomes an imaginary thinker behind your thoughts. There has to be a doer behind the person taking the actions. And then if you're feeling something, well, who's the feeler? Sort of like if you're inventing something, who's the inventor, behind all these? And this could be scenarios or whatever, just projects, that there is implicit some kind of person or identity that we're seeing ourselves as. Like, oh, that's pretty good defining the aspect of IGO, which, is, according to my research, whether it's sociology, philosophy, psychology, it's never been named. Now he's describing this. So David also then talks about what's characteristic in this sense is a confusion of identity with this pursuit, because if you're having to constantly think, the quality of those words, the intentions behind it, the way you're acting shows up in behaviors, your roles, whether that could be a title or how you want to be perceived. And then he claims that this confusion is because we're now having a self that's projected, and because this is sort of a constructed or even an artificial self, we've misidentified who we really are, because we've gone into another realm of believing the projection or putting ourselves through this process to project ourselves. That then becomes sort of a defensive mechanism. If someone challenges you, that would go against your ego and perhaps cause you to attack, or it could be other things. You're afraid to be found out, you're an imposter. All these type of things go on. So then become the evaluations of those qualities. Is this good or bad? And whatever this behavior then is, which I describe as the mass trance, uh, it becomes an illusion, right? Which is different from just hallucination or having an illusion of life. An illusion is that you're projecting something out there, or in the way that you perceive something that's out there, that is the controlling factor in your life, and either your cause is to change it, defend it, or change up in some regard because you've offended it and now you're owing it. These are all sort of descriptive factors that, whatever the adjectives are, and I call this the noun reality, because what's known to the person in this world is they're playing into perceived perceptions of people, places, and things. And it's the realization to wake up from this is to realize it's all in your mind. Now you could say it's reflection, reverberation out of real events, situations that are going on with people or things that have happened in your life. But your attention to them, and you're keeping them in place in the way that you regard them, and continually project this other sense of self that is made up in your mind into those scenarios, prompts, my theory of IGO, which is the self of the mind as we choose to see ourselves. And there could be attributes, again, that are true or agreed upon by the other group, but it's the fact that we put so much energy, attention, and time propping them up, it's probably preventing us from just being natural and being fluid with the moment, which is just being here and now, the power of now, and being empty of this agenda, because otherwise we continue to carry forth into the, we'll call the play of our life, what is that we want to be, who we want to be regarded as, and how we want to be treated. And while that's all fine and dandy, what is it covering up? And if we could shed this artificial sense of self, or what Guy Finley would say, letting go of those things that are on our mind and the committee in our head, or what we think we have to do in order to break free and just and that, to understand that that's the continuation of the duality, or at least the mass trance, that you're thinking you have to be somebody or do something in order to change it, when all you have to do is just sort of let it go and not play in the game anymore. Get out of the rigmarole. And of course, we all have our responsibilities and our day to day things that we have to take care of. But the idea is that maybe there's something going on that's causing a furthering of distance and sort of separation, and the multiplication of our situations, what I'm writing about now called the meta crisis, that there are contributing factors that are coming from our artificial sense of self, that are continually being projected, that propagates and perpetuates the situation that we're trying to resolve. It's just a theory and idea, but in talking about this, and there's so much more, and I just really kind of only got in a few pages of this chapter, the eye of the I, talking about the resolution of the ego in chapter 6. Um, you know, this artificial sense of self becomes glamorized and then becomes a drama unto itself that's fulfilled through, for some people, an obsession in living this way, in this it could be through fashion, or just sort of a power domination type paradigm. But whatever it is, one becomes in this sense of the whether it's the ego, whether it's an imagined ideal, or trying to get grounded and situated and looking for some kind of outcome in the way that we feel and want to be regarded, and these desires, they can make us imagine, that all kinds of things, that it's, becomes a drama that's acted out, and then that your own being your own self or imagined hero in your own scenarios, having to do all these different situations to rescue yourself out of the problem, or try to save somebody else who's not wanting you even to have anything to do with you. But you've got those situations going on where the self becomes equated with something that um, is what you're living for, and therefore your survival and your continuance of this artificial self determines your existence. Now that has a lot to unpack. So I'll be expanding, definitely. I mean, definitely, if I get this book deal on the IGO, Meet Your IGO, or whatever the title will be. And I'm going to apply some of this stuff here in the resolution of the Weld slush, and how we can recognize sort of a self that propagates the illusion of life. I think that's pretty powerful stuff. Anyway, I hope there's something here for you. Anyway, I recommend you reading anything that David Hawkins has written. And I was just again reading out of The Eye of the I. And again, you're listening to Mike Ratner, mikesmastermind.com. Thank you for checking it out. And I'll be adding this to Weld Slush very shortly. Thank you. So to add on some bonus content at the end, just because I don't like stopping off at the 13-minute mark, or something about that, like me wanting to have square paragraphs without using the justification tab. So what we encounter then is, when we meet each other on this plane and we're talking about level of existence, and it could just be a casual conversation or something intentional in which we're talking about our relationship or quality of communication, who are we meeting at this level, and who is projected into the space of the sense of self? And for me, I come from perspective imagining this ideal scenario with someone, to get to know them and to really understand where they're at, and in hopes that we can cut across the clutter or the confusion to where, yeah, we want to give each other respect and honor the time, and appreciate that we're having this opportunity to relate, and to kind of get a read on you know what it is we're dealing with here, and if it's something that we're working on in a relationship dynamic. And there's some of this work that's coming together on another project of mine called lovingconversations.com. I put these little plugs in because maybe someone's going to come around and go, hey, I'm the perfect expert, have me on your podcast, or let me do a podcast on your podcast channel. This could be something that we could venture into. The point here being, let me just tap in if you're hearing the click. Sorry, I'm just getting back into the phone. When I'm recording this very simple, plain speak podcast, is that In meeting quote unquote eye to eye in this regard, so we're talking about relating back from the eye of the eye, I am sort